Hi, this is Bobby, and welcome to Off the Cuffs. I'm excited today to have Darrell with me from ARCA. This is National Recovery Month. I'm glad to have you, and welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here.
No, the pleasure's mine. So listen, what we always do when we have guests here, a lot of times people know our guests, sometimes they don't. So take a few minutes and tell us who you are, tell us about ARCA, tell us how you got here, and just basically let's ease our way into it.
I'm from this area. I grew up in Kernersville. I was born in Winston-Salem, grew up in Kernersville.
Where you go to high school at?
East Forsyth.
Okay.
What
year?
63 is when I was born in 63.
So you came out in 80, 81?
82.
82?
Yeah.
You were 2 years behind me. Okay.
Okay. You
came out in 79. Came out from North. 79.
North side. Okay. Yeah. I went to UNC Greensboro.
Okay.
And graduated from there at 86. And started working for a company called RPS at the time, which became FedEx Ground.
Right.
And I worked there for 22 years. And I moved around with that company. I lived
in roadway packaging system.
Yes, roadway packaging. That's right.
I worked there too.
Did you really?
Yeah, I worked there at night, loading the trucks.
In Kernersville?
In Kernersville.
Wow.
Off of Mountain Street.
Yeah. That's where I started in 86.
Wow.
See,
there we got a connection already. See?
I didn't even know that. Wow.
A lot of people didn't know that. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I moved from operations to sales in 88, and I moved down to South Carolina, to Florence, South Carolina. I lived down there for about 7 years, covered the beach area, and then back to Charlotte and I was in Charlotte up until 2008. And I don't know if I've disclosed with you or not before, but I think I have told you that I'm in recovery, and part of my story involves I lost my job at FedEx after 22 years and wound up at ARCA as a client.
Wow.
I don't mind sharing that because in November of this year, I'll be celebrating 12 years.
Wow.
Being clean. So real happy to say that. I went to ARCA in 2008 as a client, and ARCA was part of my recovery activities after I got out of treatment. And I went back and volunteered a lot, and eventually served on the as a board member for ARCA. And I think in 2013 is when the director asked me to come start working there. And I started working there part-time in 2013 and went full-time in 2015.
Wow.
And over the years, I've just kind of picked up different responsibilities at ARCA, but I do, my title is Special Projects Manager, and I handle IT is one of my functions, but I also work on projects for the executive director. One of the biggest ones right now is moving to our new facility and getting that facility up, finished, the construction finished, and working on it, and hopefully get us moved in 2021.
So what does ARCA stand for?
Addiction Recovery Care Association.
I never told you this, but you and I have met before. They probably don't know that. I'm sure some of them don't. You and I met before,
mm-hmm.
And you told me your story. And it's amazing that I said so many times the story is to be told, not to hold. Because when people tell their stories and how they got through, it shapes and it gives other people hope to get through.
Mm-hmm.
When you told me your story, well, I think we were up at the hotel right across from the Nissan place. Mm-hmm. Exactly. You guys had your meeting there that morning.
Yes.
And we were talking, and you telling your story to me, and I think I shared with you the situation that happened in my family.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the reasons, along with a lot of other stories that people told me along the way, me and my campaign manager and a lot of other people that I met. And that's how we came up with the Never Walk Alone again. It's because so many times in life, people feel that when they are in that addiction mode, that there's shame attached to it. They don't want to discuss the struggles that they're having with. And a lot of times I think that when we remove the shame away from it, that's when the recovery stops. That's when we start to help one another, because I've often said this, how I see you determines how I treat you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we took the shame, and when we take the shame and the stigma off of an addiction, then people are more apt to speak and to say what they need. And so I applaud you, first of all, for sharing that openly again, even though I knew the story, you and I had talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, this is National Recovery Month, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So tell me something. Can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
So when you were going through that period of your life, when you look back on it, what were some of the things that gave you hope, that got you through?
I think probably some of the biggest for me is the people that like work at ARCA or in treatment centers do exactly what you just shared, is to get rid of that shame and that stigma, because that's the hardest part. People are scared to get help. They feel like often society treats them as it's a moral failing, that I've done something wrong.
Right.
I'm a bad person. We're just, as an addict or an alcoholic, I think are sick people trying to get better. We're not bad people trying to do good. And by people not judging me and telling me that it's going to be okay, we're going to get you some help. Here's a way out. We found a way for people to recover. There's multiple paths to recovery, but I found one through 12-step programs. And the 12-step programs helped me to love me when I couldn't love myself.
Wow.
And they still do today. So I think that was probably, for me, was what helped me the most.
So did you have to have a change mindset? Was a changing of mindset required to get you through, or to get you on the road to recovery?
Yes. There's I don't think anybody is, and this is going to sound funny when I say it, when people don't grow up and say, or when I grow up I want to be an addict or alcoholic.
Nobody does that.
Nobody does that, and nobody knows until all of a sudden one day you wake up and say, wow, how did I get here? How did this happen to me? And I think that it takes time. Like I started to say, you don't become an addict in 2 months or a month.
It's a process.
It takes a process. It takes a while, and it takes a while to turn that back around. That's the point I wanted to make there.
Wow. And oftentimes you look at people and you have no idea what they've been through. If I didn't know you, or I didn't know your story, I couldn't look at you and tell that, hey, you've been through some challenging times. I couldn't tell that you're 12 years in recovery. I wouldn't be able to tell that. I wouldn't. And we pass people every day on the street. We pass them by. We look at them not knowing what the situation is. And that's why I'm amazed at how sometimes, people say, I am my brother's keeper. If I was truly my brother's keeper and I love my neighbor, what a difference we could really make. What a real difference we can make. So again, I applaud you for sharing your story and telling your truth, because there's so many people out there that need help, that are afraid to get help. I was at a resident this past Saturday. You and I were talking before the cameras came on, and I was telling you that we had an overdose this past weekend. And when I go to situations like that and I see the pain in the family's eyes, and you're right, nobody wakes up today and say, hey, today is the day I'm going to be addicted to something. Nobody wakes up today and say, this is the day that my son, my daughter, my child, and we get into these situations. And so what were some of the signs when you, over the years, you've been working at ARCA for years, right?
Yes.
How many years you said?
Started in 2013.
Okay, so you've been there 7 years. So when you see people come in the door and you see some of the things that, or hear the stories of how they got there, do you find a common denominator? Like, for example, they started doing this, or the pressure, the stress. Do you find there's a common denominator, someone that they could have talked to or reached them? Are there people that you feel like you could have reached if somebody would have got to them before they got to the point of being addicted severely?
I think there are things that we see often. I believe when it comes to opiates or opioids, probably the number I think is around 80% of the folks that become addicted start with a valid prescription. And I think our medical community has some responsibility that they've overprescribed over the years. For example, if somebody gets a wisdom tooth pulled and the doctor, the dentist, or the oral surgeon gives them a 30-day supply of Oxycontin,
hydrocodone, Oxycontin.
There's no, they really don't need but 3 or 4 days worth of pain pills. And they get a 30-day. Well, there's evidence that shows people can become addicted in as little as 5 days, or start becoming dependent.
Yeah.
And it can grow from there. So I think we've gotten smart to that, and we're not prescribing as much. At least that's what I understand. But most of the folks that come in to treatment at ARCA, the addiction started from a valid prescription. They had a surgery, or they had an accident or something that caused them to get a valid prescription for opiates.
You know, I've had 3 major surgeries, right? 2 on my knee. The first one was sort of invasive, but the second surgery they did on the same knee, they replaced the knee. And I've always been afraid of pain killers, pain medicine. I've always been afraid of them. And so I've suffered and cried through the pain rather than taking the pain pills. And then the most recent one was with my shoulder about a year or so ago. A major shoulder surgery. I refused to take the pain pill, even though they prescribed them to me. I was afraid to take them because of that. And you just hit it on the head that people can become addictive in a little less than 30 days of taking something like hydrocodone. I forget the other one that they prescribed. That, you know, I said, I don't want nothing that makes me feel that good.
Oxycontin was it.
Yeah.
I had a episode with my heart about 4 years ago. And when I went into the hospital here in Winston, the Baptist Hospital, I let the doctors know that I was in recovery, and I would want to try to avoid any narcotics if possible, but if necessary, of course. And I was there for about 5 days, had a stent put in, but I was able to go through the whole process with no narcotics.
Wow.
And I used some melatonin to help me sleep. But they specially watched what was going on with me and did their best to make sure I was comfortable, but I did it without narcotics.
Wow.
Because for the same reason is why you just said. I didn't want to go there.
Yeah. You know, I say some days I think there must be something. I joke about it sometimes, but I say that these Mountain Dews are pretty much addictive to me, you know. And if it has some effect, I'm sure it probably has some health effect that I'll find out years from now after I'm gone. They'll say, hey, you know, something in the Mountain Dew. But anyway, I'm just amazed at your story and what ARCA does in the community. So about how many people do you see, residents do you see at ARCA?
Okay, I'll speak before COVID.
Okay.
Because of COVID, we're doing single rooms. So our population or our census is reduced a little bit, or by 50% actually. But normally we have a 67-bed facility right now, and we normally...
You said 67?
Yeah. We normally average about 10 folks in detox and about 40 in treatment. So we have about 50 folks on campus at any given time. The average length of stay is between 14 and 21 days. So over a year's time, we'll see up to 2,000 folks.
Wow. So let me ask you a question. Do you think that COVID has hindered, increased, or how has COVID affected what ARCA does? I know you and I were talking about how during this COVID, people have become normalized about daytime drinking.
Yes.
You know, that's become, you know, normally people say it's somewhere in the world it's after 5 o'clock, you know, so I take a beer or whatever the case may be. So now with COVID, I'm sure it's a whole different game.
It is. The challenges for us have been they're fiscal challenges because we have less funding coming in because we're serving less people, but we still have the same expenses. So that part's challenging. We're on a waiting list, a longer waiting list because we don't have as many beds available. We try our best to utilize the beds that we have, and after, say for example, if 2 people have been at ARCA for 10 days and neither are exempt or showing any symptoms, and they haven't been out of the country or been around folks with COVID, we can put them in a room together, and that'll free us up. But we're limited with classroom space too, so that makes it challenging.
So where do you get the funding from?
For folks that don't have insurance, most funding for this area comes from Cardinal Innovations, which is state-funded dollars. They're managing state-mandated dollars for mental health. But we also have contracts with Sandhills and partners. So we serve Statesville, Hickory area, and then the Sandhills area includes Guilford County and parts east.
So you do have a funding source?
Yes. We have contracts with those 3 managed care organizations, but we also serve folks on a self-pay and or folks with insurance. So if somebody still has insurance, I say still has insurance. Those that have insurance, we can work with their insurance company as well.
So the 14-day plan, you say most clients on a 14-day plan, recovery plan?
Usually it's 3 to 5 days detox,
Okay.
and then treatment will last 14 to 21 days. We prefer 21 days. But if they have a circumstance, maybe they have a court date or maybe they have employment or something, we may let them do 14 days.
So what do you find, like, correct cross dependence? You find a lot of cross dependence, single dependence. What do you find when most of the residents come through, whether it's alcohol or whether it's a cross dependent between alcohol and drugs? Or
we see a lot of alcohol, cocaine.
Alcohol, cocaine.
We see a lot of alcohol alone.
Mm-hmm.
We see a lot of, right now, we're seeing a lot of opiates mixed with methamphetamines.
Methamphetamine. True.
Methamphetamines are increasing quite a bit.
Yeah, we see them a lot on the streets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some people are polyaddicted, so is what we call it, where they may just, they just want to change the way they feel. And that usually means there's something out, there's some other mental health problem going on.
Poly mean many, huh?
Yes, many. So they just want to change the way they feel. They don't feel comfortable if they don't have something on board in their system. So that probably indicates that there's another mental health issue going on. We do some co-occurring disorders, but they may be better fit for a higher level of care, like an old vineyard or something like that.
One of the things that I have noticed with a lot of the overdoses and the overdose deaths is that it's not a black thing, it's not a white thing, it's not a rich or poor. It's a life and death thing. It has it's indiscriminate against all race, color, sexual, economic.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in homes, $1 million homes where people have overdosed.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in homes, straw homes, brick homes, and even some with no homes, trailers. Mm-hmm. And when I see that, and you think about a disease that have killed more people, I was doing some research several years ago, and I want to say, don't hold me to the exact number. I'm sure there's a lot of researchers that are going to be listening to this. Mm-hmm. But if I'm not mistaken, there were about, in the war, the Veterans War, the Vietnam War, mm-hmm. there were about 50 to 60,000 U.S. soldiers that died, somewhere along that number.
Okay.
And we're averaging across this country 70 to 80,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, we're losing more a year than we lost in the Vietnam War.
Yes.
Yeah, I was doing some research on a presentation I had to give, and I'm amazed that we're losing that many people a year. The year that I spoke about, I think the number was like 60, 70,000,
mm-hmm.
and they're adding 10 per year. So I say we're up to about 80,000 a year
mm-hmm.
Deaths. And something that is killing that many people, I would think that we will make it priority number one. Several years ago, I want to say under the Nixon administration, they made this thing called the war on drugs. 70, 74, if I'm not mistaken, the war on drugs. And we declared war on drugs. And I always looked at that. When we declare war on something, that means somebody has to lose and somebody has to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to be against something for something to be at war. We got to be at odds. And so I wondered about that. Why come we can't be, not let's say we at war, we at cure, we in search of a cure, we in search of help for those that need it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I see people from all walks of life
mm-hmm.
that have suffered and are suffering from this. And my heart goes out because I understand the pain, I understand the devastation behind it. And so if you had something that you wanted to give based on your experiences, what would it be? If you could share a word of wisdom. I always say hope. I always give people hope.
Oh, there's always hope.
Never
Definitely
give up.
Hope.
Never give up.
But I like when you were sharing about how the disease does not discriminate.
It does not.
It doesn't discriminate. Now, I will say this, and this comes from the 12-step community. but the disease will take you to one of three places: jails, institutions, or death.
Without question.
That's where you're going to wind up. ARCA is an institution, so the other two choices, neither one are really good. And I lost my train of thought there. I'm sorry. I was thinking about the disease not discriminating. I was going to say in my personal life, I wasn't a rich person by any stretch, but I had means. I had a lot of means, and I did well for myself. But for some reason, I became an alcoholic. Don't know why, but it is what it is. So, and I think the most difficult part or the biggest challenge is for folks to once they understand and figure out that they are an addict or an alcoholic, that's the biggest challenge. And once they can get past that and know that there's help out there, then they can live a normal life and they can get better.
One of the things that my father used to say all the time, as a young boy, I didn't kind of gather some of the things that he said. I didn't quite grasp him. But the older I've gotten, and he always used to tell me, there go I, had it not been for the grace of God. Mm-hmm. And I say that because when I look back at my life, my family is no different than other family. Every family, I'm sure, has an alcoholic or two or three or four. So we had alcoholics in my family. And my father, as a young boy, I used to drink Bone Farm and Mad Dog, as with the boys hanging out in the park.
I remember.
Yeah. I hope the boys don't get mad at me for telling on them, right? But we used to sit in Boone Park and sit on the picnic table, go back and forth to the 7-Eleven right there by Community Shoe Shop, and we'll get one of the winos to go in there and get us a bottle, and we go back to the park and sit there. And I'll never forget my last time of alcohol touching my lips. I probably was about 14, 15, that I had got so intoxicated, bumped my head, and the guys took me home and rang the doorbell and left me. And I'll never forget my father. Anytime I did wrong, my mother would say, Bobby, look at your son. But if I did right, my mother would take ownership of me. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget my mom, even though I was intoxicated, coming to the door and she's yelling, Bobby, come and get your son. Come and look at your so-and-so son, right? Mm-hmm. I'll keep it since it's a family show. I won't give the words she used, but it wasn't pleasant. And so I'll never forget, for a week or so, my father wouldn't speak to me. And then finally he came to me and he said, I work so hard. I work at Reynolds for you. I go to B&G Pie Company and work for you, and this is how you repay me. And he said, don't become something that you don't have to be and something you'll regret. He told me that, right? And the fact of hurting my father and seeing him cry while telling me that, it stopped me, Mm-hmm. And I hadn't had a drink of alcohol since then.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had some consequences with my parents when I was 16, 17, 18 years old.
And I could have, because like I said, the gene, as they say, it is present and was present in my family. Mm-hmm. And that's why, the older I got, I understand some things now. And I realized that what my father said was so true. There go I, or there go you, had it not been for the grace. And so a lot of things that I have looked at in my life now, I look back and I said, you can't hold your head or walk around like you're better than somebody, because you're not. Mm-hmm. And none of us are. And so one of the promises that I try to keep every day is try to be a change agent. Let's try to change and help those. And you were responsible, along with other people, for this Never Walk Alone. You came out and supported us in the first one that we had. Unfortunately, COVID kept us from it this year, but I promise you we'll be back even stronger and bigger next year.
I look forward to that.
Oh, I do too. I mean, we had a huge layout for this one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had a star-studded event that we had planned for this one. But when you were telling your story, and I was looking at you, and even though I've heard it twice now, and I was saying, wow, this guy was a manager, RPS, Roadway Packaging System. And I knew what they were paying when I was working there part-time loading trucks. So I can only imagine what they were paying you in the management department. And so you did have a great job. And looking at you, I never would have knew that story unless you told it to me. There are people walking around every day in this community that need help.
Mm-hmm.
And where I'm going with this is that once we remove the stigma from it, people will reach out for help. And I think that, I don't know because I've never been in recovery, but I believe that the sooner you get help, the chances of you being healthier or the chances of you beating it are greater.
Yes, I agree.
And so I would think that if we remove the stigma from it and realize that, again, we all in this together and that we've got to treat each other regardless of what our addictions may be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. And I also agree that if we can get to somebody sooner,
right,
whether it's just through education before they've even had that first drink or that first drug, if we can get, I like to use the analogy of going down a river.
Yeah.
Or if somebody falls into a river, if we throw them a life raft right away, it's a good chance they're going to be okay. We can get them out of the river. If you're getting to ARCA, you've gone over the waterfall. That's, you're inpatient rehab. That's your addiction has gotten so bad that you can't. You have to have 24-hour supervision. So that's kind of over the waterfall, and you're you're down there in the strong currents of the water, trying to survive, and that's how far along people are at ARCA. So and a lot of people get better coming to ARCA. So I think that if we can do more to educate folks early on,
right,
and remove that stigma, it would help tremendously.
Several years ago, I'll tell you another story. Several years ago, I got invited to speak. I want to say Friends School, a private school over in Greensboro, on the backside near the airport. Yeah, Friends School. I forget the name of it. So they invited me to come and speak and wanted me to bring somebody with me that may have been involved in drugs. So that morning, I couldn't find anyone. So I went up behind, I want to say Mr. Barbecue. Yeah, there's a place up there where they hold sessions at, right? So I pull up behind Mr. Barbecue and
Unity Club.
Right. Well, first I went to the one right there on 4th Street, and they told me they couldn't give me somebody's name or give me someone to talk to. So I said, let me go over here behind Mr. Barbecue. So I went over there behind there, go up there, and when I pulled up, there was a lady sitting in this pretty beautiful, I want to say one of those high-dollar Lexuses, right? Toyota Lexus, whatever it was. And so I get out of my truck, and I said to her, I said, ma'am, I don't know if you work here, because she looked like she worked there, like she was the owner or something, right? White female. I mean, dressed immaculate, had pearls on her. And I was like, okay. So I walked up to her, and I started telling her that I was looking for someone to go with me to speak to a group of kids about addiction. And if there was someone in there, I would pay them for their time to go and speak to the kids. And she looked at me and she said, who are you? And told at the time, I was still working with DEA. And I said, so I showed her my credentials. She called her husband. She dialed her phone and she says, honey, you're not going to believe this. And so she tells the story. This guy is looking for somebody, and she says, I feel compelled to follow him. And he says, what? And he says, put him on the phone. And so get on the phone, and she says, write his information down on his license and send it to me. And so I said, well, I don't feel no harm with that. So I let her write my stuff down. And so she follows me to the Greensboro, to the Friends School. Okay. We get to Greensboro, and her husband shows up. And he was there when we got there. He walked up to me, shook his hand. The headmaster, she came up to me at the time, and we started talking. So I did my little spiel. This lady got up, and she started telling her story. And the people and the kids' mouths fell open because she started telling her story in third person. And when they realized that the person she was talking about was her.
Wow.
Their mouth fell open. when she told about the lifestyle that she had and how her husband and her family still believed in her. And so she told me how therapeutic that was to tell her story. She had never done that before. Right?
Wow.
And Bobby, that's her name. Won't say her last name, but that's her name, I.E. And she told that story. And after that, it was teachers in that auditorium that came up, hugged her, and was crying. I later got a call from the people at the school that her story compels some people go get help, right? And I think that when people realize that you're not in this alone, when you have somebody to walk through this life with you, you have somebody that is going to hold your hand, somebody that's going to, as you say, the buddy system, the partnering. Were you married when you went through this?
No, I was not.
Okay. Wow. So you went through just you and the buddy system that they provide for you?
Yes, through the 12-step program.
12-step program?
Yes.
Wow.
It's interesting you say that. It kind of ties into Never Walk Alone, because I don't know if you're aware or not, but there's probably 25 or 30 12-step meetings in Winston-Salem every single day.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No.
There's 2 or 3 in Kernersville every single day.
I didn't know that.
They're all over the place. A lot of times they're not real conspicuous or obvious, because there's still that stigma that's there. But there's 12-step meetings everywhere. I could probably find a meeting in the next hour.
Wow.
If I needed to. They're all over. So yeah, they're that prevalent. And I think for me that was the biggest part. If I was not feeling right or something wasn't, I had a thought that a drink was a good idea or using drugs was a good idea, I can get myself to a meeting really quick.
I've never been to one.
There are open meetings. So
are there open meetings?
Yes, there's
lots to go and watch and listen.
Yes, there's open meetings. Closed meetings are intended for those that are just alcoholics or addicts. And then there are meetings that are called speaker meetings, where somebody tells their story. And then there's also discussion.
Find an open meeting for me and send it to Ms. Howell. I love to go and just listen and observe. I've never been to one. I
think you'd be amazed.
Oh, I'm sure I would.
In Winston-Salem, Kernersville, which would you prefer?
It don't matter. I mean,
Okay.
as long as it's in, driving distance, Winston, Kernersville, it don't matter.
Okay.
Louisville, Clemens, as long as we're in the county of Forsyth, yeah. I would love to do that because, what I found out is that, to me, this is one of the greatest places on the earth right here in Forsyth County. And a lot of times, the more I got out doing that, I found out there are so many pieces and silos to this community that I never knew existed, right?
Yes, I agree.
And so I think that by getting out and going to a couple of them to basically just to see and let people know that, we support you, So yeah, I would love that, man. I would love that.
That would be great.
Yeah. Wow. So 12 years, huh?
Yeah. There's also not only the 12-step meetings for the alcoholic or the addict, there's 12-step meetings for families too.
Yeah.
And there are not as many of those, but they're available. And I think I spent a lot of time working with families at ARCA.
Do you see a lot of teenagers? I mean, what's the age?
18 and up at ARCA.
18 and up in ARCA?
Yes. But we see a lot of, quite honestly, I see a lot of times where the family members are enabling
the children,
or the addict in the family or the alcoholic in the family. They can be more of the problem than the addict themselves because they continue to enable. I call it loving them to death because they just keep trying to fix things. I've heard stories of parents, buying or a loved one or a child maybe totaled had one that totaled 7 cars, and they just keep buying
7 cars.
Yeah, 7. I keep buying another car. Well, he needs to get to work. Or I was like, well, if you keep buying him a car and he keeps driving impaired, he may not live if you keep buying him more cars. But that's just one example. But there's a lot of situations where family members don't know about enabling behaviors and setting boundaries. You can learn to love somebody and hate the disease and detach
Right.
from that.
So I'm not going to love you to death. I'm going to love you to life.
Right.
I'm going to love you
Exactly.
to life. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. Wow. I could talk to you all day, man, about, yeah. So can I hit you with another personal question before
Sure.
we go?
Mm-hmm.
How difficult is it day to day? Like I know, I don't know what's, I've heard people talk about the drive in them that cause them to do that, right? Like when I get frustrated, there's a lot of things that you might come out of office sometime and I have the music going crazy and then they be like, I guess they've come to realize that I'm a little different, right? So I'll blast the music if I got going on. I can tell when I'm having real stressful days. So like I've had 4 sodas already today, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've drank 4 sodas already today, right? What is it, about 2 o'clock, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
I've drank 4 sodas, right? Since 8 o'clock this morning, right? This one right here is number 5.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when I'm having days to where something is constantly on me, I get it. I know what my triggers are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what's it like? I mean, what drives you? I mean, how do you know, like you said, you made the comment, if I need to go to a 12-step program, there's something that'll trigger.
I think that, I think over time, as we progress in our recovery, and we're always working, we're never going to be perfect. Nobody's ever going to be perfect.
Never.
But as we're walking, no, we're not going to be perfect. Now, I haven't had a drink or drug in 12 years, but never going to work the program perfectly, if that's the way I wanted to describe it. But as we progress, those thoughts of, well, a drink sure would feel good right now, or that would make things better, or that kind of thing, they become fleeting thoughts. Now I'm speaking from my experience.
Every person is different.
And that my experience is limited to alcohol and to be frank, cocaine. Those are the 2 things that I liked. I hope I'm not committing a felony admitting to a felony.
Statute of limitation gone.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, you statute of limitation gone.
But the, those, most people, if they can get through a year or 2 in recovery, those cravings go away. They become more fleeting thoughts. I've seen more struggles with heroin and opiates. I see a lot more struggles. That's a tougher one. I don't have personal experience with that, but what I see from working in a treatment center, I see a lot of people that really struggle with opiates, trying to get off of those. So it is a little different, I think, working with that particular drug.
Well, there are my prayers that you get 70 more years of sobriety, 70 more years.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. If you ever need us, we're here. If I can ever do anything for you, you know where I'm at.
Well, I appreciate it.
And I would love to have you back. I'm looking forward to partnering with you again on Never Walk Alone again.
Oh, yeah. Definitely looking forward to that.
So before we go home, before we take it home, tell me something that, tell me where we can find ARCA. Tell me the numbers. Tell me what people can do if they need any help. And give me something to go home with, to think about, to give people something to think about.
Well, the ARCA is real easy. We're in the front of the phone book because it starts with an A.
Okay.
So that's an easy one. Or ARCANC for NorthCarolina.org is our website. And we do a lot of triage calls. People will call us, and we're 24/7 operation.
Yeah.
So if somebody's not sure, they can call us, and we'll, if they're not a good fit for ARCA, we can get them routed to the proper level of care that they might need.
Yeah.
Because there's certain things that we can do and certain things we can't. So we can do that for them. I share this more. I've shared this before. I shared it at Never Walk Alone. I was interviewed by one of the news stations there. I think the biggest thing that I didn't know about when I was in the throes of my alcoholism and addiction, I had no idea of all the help that was out there, that the treatment facilities that were available, whether you can afford it or not. If you can afford it, it's great. If you have insurance, there's lots and lots of help. There's less resources available for uninsured, but there are resources. And sometimes it might take calling us two or 3 times, or we may ask you to call us back 3 or 4 days in a row because we're waiting on a bed, or we'll put your name on a waiting list. But there is help there. And if we can't get you in, and if it's an urgent situation, we're going to try to find somewhere for you.
Wow. You know what this reminds me of? My pastor told a story some years ago, and it sticks in my mind. And when you were talking about never walk alone and get helping people, is that somewhere in America, Main Street, a man fell in a hole. And he was down in that hole, and he was raising his hand and screaming out for help. And a doctor walked by, and they saw the man down in there, and he said, let me drop my card down in the hole, because when you get out of here, you're going to need some counseling. And then there was a lawyer that walked by, and he said, let me leave my card for you, because we're going to sue them for leaving this manhole uncovered. And he dropped his card down in there. And of course, there was a reporter came by and said, hey, let me leave my card, which I'm going to drop my card down in the hole, because I want to do the breaking story on this, how you fell in this hole. But then there was a guy that came along and jumped down in the hole. And the guy said, why did you do that? He said, I've been down here in this hole before. Let me hold your hand and show you how to get out.
Awesome.
So I appreciate you for jumping down in the hole and holding hands and helping people out. I appreciate what you do. And as always, if you need me, the sheriff's office, the office of the people, I'm here for you. And once again, I want to thank you for coming today and sharing with you. And as always, please come back and see us.